You've probably seen a photo of a massive cargo ship sitting perfectly still in the middle of open ocean, miles from any coast, and just scrolled past it. Didn't question it, didn't wonder, but you should have. Because the ocean in the middle of a major shipping lane can be 12,000 feet deep. That's over 2 miles of water beneath the hull. So, where exactly does the anchor go? Does it just dangle in the dark? What if the chain isn't long enough? Why doesn't the ship drift away the moment the current changes? And what about storms? Does a chunk of steel actually hold a vessel the size of an apartment block against a force 10 gale? Here's the part that will change how you look at every ship photo for the rest of your life. First, let's define what anchoring actually is, because it's not what you picture. Most people carry around a mental image borrowed from cartoons and tattoos, a hook-shaped anchor biting into the seafloor, holding a ship the way a stake holds a tent. That image is almost completely wrong. Anchoring isn't about a fixed pin in the ground. It's about controlled resistance. And the thing doing most of the resisting isn't even the anchor. It's the chain. Here's the misconception and why it formed. People assume the anchor digs in, locks down, and the ship hangs tight above it. But a real anchor isn't designed to fight vertical pull. It's designed to lie flat and resist horizontal drag. The flukes, those wing-like blades on the anchor's head, only bite into the seafloor when the pull is nearly parallel to the bottom. The moment you pull upward at a steep angle, they release. But the anchor is built to fail at the wrong angle on purpose, so it can be retrieved. But here's where it gets crazy. That means the anchor alone would be useless without the chain doing something clever first. The chain doesn't hang straight down. It drops from the bow, sinks through the water, and curves along the seafloor in a drooping arc called a catenary. Picture the way a very heavy necklace hangs between two fingers held apart. That sag, that curve, that's a catenary. The mathematics of that shape mean the horizontal tension at the point where the chain meets the seafloor is nearly zero, so the anchor only ever feels a sideways tug, never a lift. The flukes dig in sideways, bite the seabed, and hold. The chain absorbs the movement. Think of it like a leash made of iron, but the leash weighs as much as a pickup truck. When the ship tries to drift, the chain doesn't yank the anchor free. It sags lower first, absorbing the energy the way a suspension bridge cable absorbs traffic vibration, and only then transmits a gentle horizontal pull to the anchor below. Now here's where the numbers get unbelievable. Each single link in a large ship's anchor chain weighs roughly 175 to 300 pounds. That's the weight of a full-grown adult per link, and there are hundreds of them. A supertanker's full anchor chain can weigh over 100 tons. That's heavier than 10 adult elephants, and its entire job is to droop correctly. The ratio of chain length to water depth is called the scope ratio, and in calm water, sailors aim for 5 to 1 to 7 to 1, 5 to 7 feet of chain for every foot of depth. In a storm, you want 10 to 1, so in 100 feet of water during rough weather, you need 1,000 feet of chain just lying in a heavy curve on the seafloor. That's why anchored ships swing in wide, lazy circles when the wind shifts. They're not stuck. They're tethered on a very long, very heavy leash, and the whole system rotates around the anchor point. But what about mid-ocean? What about the places that are genuinely miles deep? This is the part everyone misses. Ships don't anchor in truly deep water. They can't, no chain is long enough, and even if it were, the weight would be impossible to recover. So here's the contrast that rewires how you think about this. Anchoring and mooring are two completely different things. Anchoring means the ship carries its own gear, drops it temporarily, and retrieves it later. Workable in depths up to a few hundred feet, sometimes pushing 1,000 in an emergency. Yet a mooring is different. Mooring means permanent infrastructure already installed on the seafloor. Massive concrete blocks, driven piles, or purpose-built anchors connected by heavy chain to a surface buoy. The ship arrives and ties to the buoy. It's not carrying anything. The hardware is already there, engineered specifically for that location. Most of those dramatic ship anchored in the open ocean photos you've seen, the ship is moored, not anchored. Different system, different physics, different scale entirely. And then there's the third option, which sounds like science fiction but is completely real: dynamic positioning. The most advanced offshore vessels, drill ships, floating production platforms, pipe-laying barges, often have no anchor whatsoever. Instead, they carry multiple thrusters mounted in every direction beneath the hull and a GPS system accurate to within centimeters feeds their position to a computer hundreds of times per second. The computer fires the thrusters in constant tiny corrections, fighting current, wind, and waves simultaneously, holding the ship in exactly one spot without anything touching the seafloor at all. The most sophisticated stationary vessel in the world stays still entirely through software. That's like parking your car by having the engine constantly micro-correct against the wind. The idea of anchoring is ancient, but it took a long time for anyone to understand why it worked. The earliest anchors were rocks tied to rope, brutal, heavy, frequently useless. Greek sailors used baskets packed with stones, reasoning that heavier meant better, which was partially right but missed the key variable entirely. One theory, and historians largely agree on this, is that the Greeks and then the Romans started adding a crossbar, called a stock, to the anchor shaft sometime around 400 to 500 BCE. The stock's job was simple but transformative. It made the anchor fall correctly, flukes down, every time it hit the seafloor. Before the stock, an anchor might land on its side and just sit there doing nothing while the ship drifted. After the stock, it consistently bit in. Romans refined this further with composite wood and lead designs, essentially the first engineered anchor rather than a shaped rock. But the iconic Admiralty anchor, the one on every sailor tattoo and naval crest, didn't become standard until the 1800s. But after centuries of incremental improvement through countless storms and shipwrecks, every modification was earned the hard way. Nobody sat down and derived the catenary. They just kept losing ships until the designs that survived became tradition. This is the part that should genuinely stop you. The catenary curve that keeps a 300,000-ton ship from drifting into a shipping lane is the exact same mathematical shape as the power lines drooping between poles outside your window right now. Suspension bridge cables, the Golden Gate, the Brooklyn Bridge, hang in a catenary between their towers. The cables aren't pulled straight, they sag deliberately, and that sag is where the strength lives. A hammock is a catenary. You are lying in anchor physics every time you use one. Playground swings at rest hang in a catenary. That buoy you swim out to at the beach is held by a small anchor using the exact same flat-angle bite principle, just scaled down from a supertanker to something a diver can adjust by hand. Offshore oil platforms use 6 to 12 mooring lines radiating outward in a star pattern, each one a catenary, collectively holding a structure the size of a city block against open ocean conditions. Cruise ships waiting outside congested ports, which happens constantly at places like Nassau, Cozumel, and Santorini, anchor in 100 to 200 feet of water while passengers eat breakfast with no idea the ship isn't at a dock. Aircraft carrier anchor chains are so massive that the individual links are forged one at a time and inspected before assembly. And the fiber optic cables on the seafloor carrying most of the world's internet traffic are weighted and draped in catenary curves to prevent stress concentrations. River barges anchor upstream and let the current press them gently against the chain tension. One theory under active development involves space tethers, long cables connecting satellites to lower masses, using catenary geometry in orbit to maintain relative position without thruster fuel. The same curve, everywhere, but anchoring fails. This is the thing the postcard never shows you. Anchor drag, where the anchor breaks free and the ship begins drifting silently, happens in storms, in poor seafloor conditions, when the scope is too short, or when the seabed is the wrong type. Sand holds well. Hard mud is variable. Weed is treacherous. Rock is nearly useless. The flukes can't bite into something they can't penetrate. A $200 million container ship can begin slowly drifting toward a reef at 3 a.m. because the anchor found a patch of kelp instead of sand. This is why anchored ships are never truly unattended. Anchor watch is a real, continuous job. Someone monitoring the GPS position against a fixed point, engine on standby, ready to respond the moment the position starts creeping. Anchor drag happens, but modern ships have GPS alarm systems that detect position change within meters. Therefore, the crew wakes, engines start, and the ship powers back to position before disaster. Usually. So here's where you actually land after all of this. You came in thinking a ship anchors the way a tent stake goes in the ground, something pointy forced into something solid. What's actually happening is a physics problem solved by geometry. The anchor is almost a decoy. The real mechanism is a curve of steel so heavy it reshapes how force travels through it, using its own weight to convert a ship's drift into a gentle sideways nudge that flukes in the seafloor can resist. A system discovered accidentally by sailors tying rocks to rope, refined across 2,000 years of maritime trial and error, now sometimes replaced entirely by a GPS algorithm running on hardware smaller than your microwave. Next time you see a ship sitting still in open water, you're not looking at something parked. You're looking at applied geometry. And if you think that's a strange way to keep something still, wait until you find out how ships steer when they're going backward. That's an entirely different kind of physics problem. And the answer is just as counterintuitive.